He didn't ask, he didn't request. He simply slid a folded document across the white linen tablecloth, tapped it twice with one finger and said, "Sign it. Your father's debts disappear by morning." James Whitaker didn't look up from his champagne glass. He treated the offer the way a man treats a bill at a restaurant routine, forgettable, already decided. Elena Hart sat across from him in a borrowed dress, her hands folded in her lap, her jaw tight. She had spent 26 years clawing her way out of poverty, through nursing school, through an MBA program. She paid for herself, and in 30 seconds, a man who didn't even know her name had reduced her entire life to a transaction. And the worst part, she was still listening. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, hit that subscribe button right now and follow Elena's journey all the way to the end. Drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Elena Hart had learned early in life that the universe operated on a cruel kind of irony. The harder you worked, the more the people you loved found ways to undo it. She had known that truth since she was 11 years old, standing in the kitchen of their apartment in Queens, while her mother counted crumpled dollar bills on the counter and tried to calculate whether they could afford both electricity and groceries that week. Her father had been at the casino. He was always at the casino. 26 years later, Elena was a registered nurse working double shifts at Mercy General Hospital, and she also held an MBA from Columbia that she had earned by studying between 12-hour nursing shifts, surviving on coffee, and the kind of stubbornness that looks a lot like stupidity from the outside. She was not rich, she was not connected, but she was standing in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel in Manhattan, holding a glass of sparkling water. She had not paid for wearing a dress borrowed from her colleague Dana because her supervisor, Margaret Chen, had insisted she attend the Meridian Health Foundation Gala as a representative of Mercy General's leadership. "You worked on the pediatric wing expansion proposal," Margaret had told her. "You belong in the room, Elena. Go. Be seen." Elena had not wanted to be seen. She had wanted to go home, eat leftover rice, and sleep for 9 hours. But Margaret had that particular way of framing things that made refusal feel like moral failure. And so Elena had put on Dana's navy dress, which was slightly too long and slightly too tight in the shoulders, and she had walked into a room full of people who had spent more on their table centerpieces than she earned in a month. She had been managing fine. She had spoken with 2 hospital board members, eaten exactly 1 shrimp from a passing tray, and was beginning to calculate the earliest polite moment she could leave when her phone buzzed. It was her mother's number. Elena's stomach dropped the way it always did at her mother's calls after 9 p.m. Nothing good ever arrived through those calls. She stepped out of the main hall into the quieter corridor near the coat check, pressed her phone to her ear, and heard her mother's voice, small and cracked and terrified. "Elena, your father, he's in real trouble this time." "Mom," Elena kept her voice flat. She had learned to keep it flat. "How much?" $340,000. The number hit her like a physical thing. She gripped the phone tighter. "Say that again." $340,000. He borrowed from people you don't borrow from, Elena. They came to the house tonight. They came inside. They told him he had 72 hours. Loan sharks. I don't know what to call them. I just know they weren't, her mother's voice broke. They weren't asking nicely. Elena stood very still in that corridor, her borrowed dress feeling like a costume, her MBA feeling like a punchline. She ran the numbers in her head the way she always did, automatically, grimly. Her savings $42,000, her salary not enough, her credit usable but not for that amount. She thought about her father's face, stupid and sorry, always sorry, and she hated herself for still loving him enough to feel the fear spiking in her chest. She was still standing there when someone appeared at her elbow. "Ms. Hart." She turned. The man beside her was tall, dark-suited, with the particular stillness of someone who had never had to raise his voice to get a room's attention. His face was precise and composed, the kind of composed that gets mistaken for coldness, until you look at his eyes, which were dark and watching and gave nothing away. She recognized him immediately because everyone in that room recognized James Whitaker. He was the chairman of Whitaker Industries, the man who had built 3 of the tallest buildings on the Manhattan skyline, and had reportedly bought an entire city block in Brooklyn just because the view annoyed him. "I'm sorry," Elena said, pulling herself straight. "I need a moment. Do I know you?" "No," he said, "but I know you. You're Elena Hart. You put together the financial restructuring proposal for Mercy General's pediatric wing expansion. I'm on the Foundation's advisory board. Your proposal was the most technically rigorous document submitted this year. He paused. I also know who your father is, and I know what happened tonight. The cold settled into Elena's chest. Excuse me. Raymond Hart borrowed $340,000 from associates of mine. James said, his voice even and unreadable. Not from me directly, but they called me out of courtesy before they escalated the matter. I've been aware of your father's situation for several weeks. You've been aware. The words came out sharp and clipped. And you waited until tonight to say something. I was deciding whether to say anything at all. He tilted his head slightly. I've made a decision. Follow me. Elena stared at him. I'm not going to follow you anywhere. I don't know you. You know of me. That's sufficient for this conversation. He met her eyes, and something in his expression was not unkind, but it was uncompromising in a way that made her feel like she was already standing on a train platform and the train had already left. 2 minutes, Ms. Hart. If you don't like what I say, walk away and we never speak again. Your father deals with the consequences on his own timeline. It was a cold thing to say. Elena hated that it worked. She followed him to a private alcove off the corridor where a small table had been set apart from the main event with the kind of quiet that money buys. He sat down. She did not. He produced a single folded document from inside his jacket and placed it on the table. I have a problem, James said, and you have a problem. I'm proposing we solve them simultaneously. I'm listening, Elena said, because she had no choice but to listen, and they both knew it. My company is in the middle of a major acquisition. My board and my investors have been applying pressure regarding my personal stability. There's a perception that I'm unanchored, that a man without personal commitments is a liability at the executive level. He said this the way someone might read from a quarterly report. Factual, unmoved. I need a wife. Specifically, I need the appearance of a committed relationship managed over approximately 12 months, after which we can dissolve the arrangement quietly and professionally. Elena looked at him for a long moment. You are proposing that I marry you? Contractually, yes. And in exchange, my father's debt disappears. In exchange, I personally guarantee the debt is settled within 48 hours and that the men your father borrowed from have no further reason to contact your family. He folded his hands on the table. The document outlines the terms: monthly stipend, living arrangement, public appearances, and at the end of 12 months, a settlement of $200,000 paid to you directly. Elena said nothing. Her hands were very still at her sides. I should add, James continued, that I don't do this lightly. I had you investigated before tonight. Your record at Mercy General, your academic history, your financial situation. I know what you've built and what you've had to carry while building it. His voice shifted slightly, not warmer exactly, but less mechanical. You're not a random choice, Ms. Hart. I'm a calculated one, she said quietly. Yes. She picked up the document. She looked at it for a long time without reading it, because reading it would make it real, and she was not ready for it to be real. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone. She thought about 72 hours and men who didn't ask nicely. She thought about $42,000 sitting in a savings account that might as well be a thimble trying to fill a bathtub. There are conditions you haven't mentioned, she said. James looked at her without flinching. Yes. Tell me. For the arrangement to be credible, he said slowly, it cannot be purely transactional in appearance. That means certain expectations around compatibility, shared space, a degree of closeness that would satisfy public and private scrutiny. Elena set the document down very carefully, the way you set something down when you're aware of what you'll do if you grip it any tighter. You're talking about intimacy. I'm talking about the appearance of a real marriage, James said. What that means specifically would be negotiated between us, nothing without consent, nothing without discussion. But I will not pretend to be distant from my own wife in front of investors and board members who are watching for exactly that kind of performance. So you're not just buying a wife, Elena said. You're auditioning for one. Something flickered across his face. Not offense. Something more complicated than offense. I wouldn't have used that word, but it's accurate. He was quiet for a moment. I suppose it is. Elena walked away from the table. She did not run. She walked to the end of the alcove and stood there with her back to him, breathing slowly, counting her heartbeats the way she did when a patient coded and the room started spinning and she needed her hands to be steady. She was very, very good at making her hands steady. Her phone buzzed again. Her mother. She did not answer it. She turned around. I want the debt settled in 24 hours, not 48, she said. I want a separate bedroom. I want my work schedule at the hospital to remain completely untouched. I want it in writing that you have no claim on any of my professional activities or intellectual property, and I want a lawyer of my choosing to review any document before I sign. She crossed her arms. Those are my opening terms. If you don't like them, I'll find another way. James Whitaker looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, and for the first time something in his posture shifted, not softened exactly, but rearranged. Like he had been expecting someone to fold and was recalibrating for someone who didn't. 24 hours, he said, separate bedroom to start. Your work schedule is your own. Your lawyer reviews everything. He paused. And you'll have dinner with me 3 times a week, starting this Saturday. Elena breathed in through her nose. Fine. Then we have the beginning of a negotiation. Ms. Hart. We have the beginning of a problem, she corrected. Don't confuse the two. She picked up the document from the table, folded it, and put it in her small evening bag. She walked out of the alcove without looking back, and she made it all the way to the elevator bank before her legs started to shake. She pressed the button for the lobby. She stared at her own reflection in the polished elevator doors. The woman looking back at her was composed and upright and wearing a borrowed dress, and she had just agreed to negotiate a marriage contract with a man she had known for 11 minutes because her father had gambled away money they didn't have, and strangers had walked into her mother's house. She pressed her palm flat against the elevator door and held it there until her hands stopped trembling. The next morning, Elena called her friend and colleague, Dana Reyes, before her 7 a.m. shift. I need to tell you something, Elena said, and I need you not to scream. Elena, it is 6:45 in the morning, and I have not had coffee. Please do not tell me something that requires me not to scream. James Whitaker offered to pay off my father's debts. Silence. Dana. I'm not screaming, Dana said. I'm having a controlled internal collapse. There's a difference. James Whitaker, the James Whitaker. Yes. The billionaire? Yes. Elena, what did he want in return? And before you answer, know that whatever you say next is going to determine whether I spend the rest of this conversation as your friend or your crisis counselor. Elena told her. All of it. The gala, the document, the conditions, the terms she had counteroffered. Dana was quiet through all of it, which was unusual for Dana, who had opinions about everything, including the way the hospital cafeteria arranged its salad bar. When Elena finished, Dana said very quietly, What are you going to do? I already called my lawyer, Elena said. She's reviewing the document this morning. That's not what I asked. I know. Elena looked out her apartment window at the gray morning sky over Queens. I'm going to sign it, Dana, because there isn't another option that gets my mother's house safe in 24 hours. And I have spent my entire life being somebody's fallback, somebody's safety net, somebody's emergency plan. If I'm going to do it one more time, at least this time I'm getting something real out of the deal. Dana was quiet again. Then she said, You are the smartest person I know and also sometimes the most stubborn, and I love you, and I will absolutely help you pick outfits for billionaire wife dinners. I hate you. No, you don't. What time is your shift? Elena's lawyer, a sharp-minded woman named Carol Ewan, who had gotten Elena through every contract dispute, housing negotiation, and professional complication of the past 6 years, called at noon with a summary that was both reassuring and deeply unsettling. The document is legitimate, Carol said, detailed, professionally drafted, and actually remarkably protective of your interests, more so than I expected. The stipend is real. The exit clause is clean, and the non-disclosure terms are mutual, which means he can't talk about you and you can't talk about him. The clause about compatibility expectations is vague, Elena. Intentionally vague. That's the part that needs to be tightened before you touch this pen. How do I tighten it? You define the terms in writing, in a signed addendum, before any of this starts. Carol paused. I have to ask you a direct question. Go ahead. Do you understand what you're walking into, not legally, personally? Elena was quiet for a moment. I understand that it's transactional and that I'm going into it with my eyes open and that he's not pretending otherwise. That's not the same thing as understanding it personally, Carol said. Carol, I know. I'll have the addendum drafted by 3. Elena signed the contract at 6:30 that evening in a conference room at Whitaker Industries that was almost certainly larger than her entire apartment. James was there. 2 lawyers were there. A notary was there. Nobody spoke except to read the specific clauses aloud for the record. Elena's hand was completely steady when she signed. She made a point of it. James walked her to the elevator afterward. They stood side by side, waiting for the doors to open, and the silence between them was the particular silence of 2 people who have just done something they can't undo and are each quietly deciding how to feel about that. The debt will be cleared by 8 a.m. tomorrow, he said. Your mother will receive a call from my office confirming it. Thank you. The words felt strange in her mouth. She didn't want to thank him, but her mother would sleep tonight, and that mattered more than her discomfort. Saturday, James said. Dinner, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. I'll drive myself, Elena said. The elevator opened. She stepped in. She turned to face him because she had learned from her years in the hospital that you never let someone see you retreat. Mr. Whitaker, she said. James, he said. James. She tested the word the way you test a step you're not sure will hold. I want you to understand something before Saturday. I'm not going to perform for you. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not to make your investors comfortable. I'm going to be exactly who I am. If that's not sufficient, we have a very short marriage ahead of us. He looked at her, and again that flicker of something complicated, unreadable, not quite what she expected from a man who treated people like line-on items. I know who you are, Elena, he said quietly. That's why I'm standing here. The elevator doors closed between them. She stared at her reflection again. The same woman. The borrowed dress was gone. She was in her work clothes now, her nursing ID still clipped to her pocket because she had gone straight from her shift to his conference room. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who worked too hard and slept too little and had just made a decision that would unravel every careful thing she had built around herself. But her father's debt was going to be cleared by morning. Her mother would sleep. The men who had walked into her parents' house would have no more reason to walk anywhere near her family. Elena Hart pressed the lobby button and told herself that was enough. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough. But she held the thought like a lifeline anyway, because that was what you did when you were a nurse and everything was falling apart. You held the one thing that was working and you moved forward and you dealt with the rest when you got there. Saturday was 4 days away. She had 4 days to figure out how to sit across a dinner table from the man who had just bought her time and her presence and the use of her name and not let him see a single thing she was actually feeling. She was very good at that. She had been practicing her whole life. What she had no practice for, none at all, was the possibility that James Whitaker might turn out to be someone worth actually looking at. Saturday arrived the way bad ideas always do, faster than expected and with no warning that it was going to matter. Elena drove herself to the restaurant. She had looked it up beforehand, the way she researched everything methodically and without sentiment. Aurelius, 54th floor, Midtown Manhattan, 3 Michelin stars, a tasting menu that cost more than her monthly car payment. She had worn the simplest dress she owned, black, knee-length with a collar that meant business, and she had pulled her hair back the same way she did before a long shift because she was not going to perform, and she had said so, and she intended to mean it. James was already at the table when she arrived. He stood when he saw her. That surprised her. She had not expected him to stand. You drove yourself, he said. I told you I would. Most people say things and then don't do them. He held out her chair. She looked at the chair, then at him, then sat down because refusing a chair was a level of stubborn she wasn't prepared to commit to on a first dinner. I'm not most people, she said. I know. He sat across from her and picked up the menu, and for a moment they were just 2 people at a table, which was so wildly disconnected from their actual situation that Elena almost laughed. She did not laugh. She looked at the menu instead. Do you eat here often? Often enough that they know my order, he said, but I won't assume yours. Order whatever you want. I want to know something first. Elena said, setting the menu down. She had promised herself she would not do small talk. She had no patience for small talk, and she had less patience for pretending she did. Why nursing? He looked up. What do you mean? You said you had me investigated. You knew about my MBA. So why mention the nursing first? When you introduced yourself, you didn't say you knew about my business degree. You said you knew about my proposal for the pediatric wing. That's a clinical context. You led with nursing. James was quiet for a beat, because the proposal was written by someone who understood both the financial architecture and what the beds were actually really for. Most of the documents I review at that level are written by people who understand one or the other. Yours understood both. He paused. That's unusual. Elena studied him. That's a careful answer. It's the true answer. Careful and true aren't mutually exclusive, she said, but careful answers are what people give when they're managing impressions. I'd like to skip that part. Something in his expression shifted, not defensively, but with the focused attention of someone recalibrating. All right, he said slowly. What would you like to know? Why are you actually doing this? Not the board narrative, not the investor optics. The real reason. The waiter arrived. James ordered without looking at the menu. Elena ordered the salmon because she liked salmon, and she was not going to order something small to avoid appearing hungry. When the waiter left, James leaned back slightly in his chair and looked at her with the particular expression of someone deciding how honest to be. My last serious relationship ended 18 months ago, he said. She was someone I trusted. We had been together for 2 years. She sold information about a pending acquisition to a competitor and made $400,000 from it. My legal team handled it. I didn't. He said it flatly without drama, but something around his jaw tightened fractionally. My board has been watching me act like a man who doesn't trust anyone since then. Because I am. And a man who doesn't trust anyone isn't a man you trust with a $12 billion enterprise. Elena was quiet for a moment. So the real answer is that you got burned and you can't fake your way back to normal. I could fake it, James said. I chose not to. Faking it with the wrong person makes everything worse. And you think I'm the right person. I think you're someone who has no reason to manipulate me, he said. Your interests are explicit. The contract defines them. You're not going to sell my secrets because you don't care about my business, and you're not going to pretend to love me because you've already made clear you're not in the business of pretending. He met her eyes. That's not nothing, Elena. She sat with that for a moment. She realized, a strange kind of compliment, being valued for your disinterest. She was not sure whether to be flattered or insulted, and the uncertainty annoyed her. How long were you planning before the gala, she asked. 3 weeks. You decided in 3 weeks to approach a stranger about a marriage contract. I decided in 3 weeks to approach you, he said, and there was a precision in the distinction that made her go still. That's not the same thing. The food arrived. Elena ate. James ate. They talked about the hospital, and then about the foundation's funding gaps, and then, without quite planning it, about her father. She had not intended to talk about her father. She talked about her father. He's not a bad man, she said, and hated how automatic it sounded, how many times she had said those words. He's never once in his life been able to sit with discomfort. Any discomfort at all. The casinos let him buy his way out of feeling whatever he's feeling for a few hours. He comes back and everything is worse, and he's sorry and he means it, and then he does it again. She put down her fork. I've been cleaning up after him since I was 17. And you're still doing it, James said. I'm doing it for my mother, Elena said sharply. I know. He wasn't judging. His voice was level and careful, but not in the managed impression way she had challenged earlier. This was different. It was the care of someone who understood the difference between what people say and what they mean. How is she? Elena looked at him. She called me this morning. She said to tell you thank you. She paused. She doesn't know the terms. I told her you're someone I met through work. She assumes she's made assumptions. I didn't correct them. What does she assume? That you're someone who cares about me. Elena said it plainly without softening it. Which is the point of the arrangement, so I suppose it's working. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who were saying more than they intended to, and were both aware of it, and neither of them knew what to do about that yet. James refilled her water glass. It was a small thing, automatic, and he did it before she reached for the pitcher herself, and something about that, the attention of it, the quickness of it, landed somewhere she hadn't prepared for. She reached for her own glass and did not think about it further. After dinner, when they were standing in the corridor outside the elevator bank, James said, "I have a function next Thursday evening. Investor dinner, 40 guests, very formal. I need you there." "How much notice is that?" Elena said. 6 days. "I'm working a double shift Wednesday into Thursday. I'll have a car at the hospital at 6. The dinner starts at 8. That gives you time to change." "I'm not changing in a car. There's a suite at the Westfield across from the hospital. You can change there." She stared at him. "You already arranged a suite." "I arranged the possibility of a suite," he said. "I was going to ask you tonight." "You arranged it before you asked me." "Yes." He didn't apologize for it. He looked at her steadily, the same way he had looked at her across that alcove table at the gala. "I move quickly. I told you that in the contract." "You told me a lot of things in the contract," Elena said. "That doesn't mean I've finished processing all of them." He was quiet. Then, "Is that a yes?" She breathed out. "That's a conditional yes. If I'm still standing after a double shift, I'll be at your dinner. If I'm not standing, you tell your investors I had a medical emergency, which will not be entirely inaccurate." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but almost. It was the first time she had seen anything close to it, and it was brief. And he seemed to catch it and pull it back like a man who didn't quite trust what his own face was doing. "Fair enough," he said. 3 days into the arrangement, Elena came home to her apartment to find a box outside her door. It was unmarked except for her name in neat handwriting. She stood there looking at it for a moment, then picked it up, took it inside, set it on her kitchen table, and did not open it for 40 minutes while she ate dinner and tried to decide whether opening it was a thing she wanted to do. She opened it. Inside was a leather-bound planner, the kind she had been eyeing online for 6 months, but had talked herself out of because it was $80 and she had priorities. Tucked inside the front cover was a small card. It said, "You mentioned your schedule last Thursday. This seemed more reliable than a phone calendar. No obligation, Jay." Elena sat at her kitchen table with the planner in her hands and felt something move through her chest that she did not have a clean name for. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It wasn't suspicion exactly. It was the uneasy recognition that James Whitaker was paying attention to things she hadn't asked him to notice, and she didn't know yet whether that was a good thing or a warning. She called Dana. "He sent me a planner," she said the moment Dana picked up. "A planner. A leather one, the kind I've been looking at for months." Dana was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Elena, don't. I'm not doing anything. You're doing the voice." "I don't have a voice." Dana paused. "Okay, I have a voice. But listen, that's not a contractual gift. A contractual gift is flowers or something impersonal. A planner he noticed you wanted that's different." "It means he's observant," Elena said. "That's a business skill. Don't romanticize it." "I'm not romanticizing anything. I'm just pointing out that a man who barely speaks unless necessary apparently had a specific enough conversation with you to know what kind of planner you use." Elena looked at the planner on her kitchen table. "I don't use any planner. I've been using the Notes app on my phone." "Which means he listened to something you said and thought about it afterward." "Dana, I'm going to hang up." "Okay, but before you do, are you going to the Thursday dinner?" "Yes." "And are you going to keep pretending you're not curious about him?" Elena hung up. The Thursday dinner was everything she had anticipated and nothing she had prepared for. 40 guests in a private dining room at the kind of establishment that didn't put prices on the menu. Elena arrived in a steel gray dress she had bought in 30 minutes at a department store near the hospital, her hair down for the first time since the gala, and when James saw her walk into the room, he crossed it to meet her. He did not touch her. He had not touched her since the arrangement began, but he put his hand at the small of her back as he guided her to their seats, and the touch was brief and light and felt like an electric current anyway, which she decided immediately to treat as irrelevant information. "You look tired," he said quietly into her ear as they walked. "I'm a nurse on the back end of a double shift." she murmured back. I'm always tired. I look better than I feel. You look fine, he said. In the ordinariness of it, not stunning, not beautiful, just fine, which meant real made her feel oddly steadier. She sat through 4 courses and 11 conversations, and she was good at it. She had not expected to be good at it, but she had years of managing difficult families and difficult moments of reading rooms and calibrating tone, and a table of investors turned out to be not entirely different from a waiting room full of people who were scared and needed to believe that someone in charge knew what she was doing. She laughed in the right places. She held her own through a conversation about healthcare infrastructure that turned into an actual debate she won without raising her voice. She watched James watch her from the other end of the table, and she made herself look away. After dinner in the car, she had let him send one this time because a double shift. She sat in the back seat and looked out the window and tried to organize her thoughts into something useful. James said from across the seat, "They liked you. You sound surprised." "I'm not surprised. I knew they would." He paused. I was watching you with Gerald Haynes. He's one of the most disagreeable people in the room. He was listening to you." "People listen when you talk to them like they're worth listening to," Elena said. "That's not as obvious as it sounds." "I know it isn't." She looked over at him. He was looking out his own window, the city lights moving across his face, and she tried to find the right word contained. Like a man who had built walls so thoroughly that he had forgotten what was inside them. "James," she said. He looked at her. "Your ex," she said carefully. "Did you love her?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then I thought I did. I'm less certain now what I was actually feeling." "What do you mean by you want gun?" "I mean, I think I was in love with the idea of having someone I could trust completely. Whether I was in love with her specifically?" He stopped. "I'm not sure that distinction was clear to me at the time." Elena thought about that. "That's an honest answer. You asked an honest question." The car stopped in front of her building. She gathered her bag and reached for the door handle, and then she stopped because something had been sitting with her all evening, and she had been waiting for the right moment to say it, and possibly there wasn't going to be a right moment. "The addendum," she said. "The compatibility clause. You haven't pushed on it." "I said nothing without consent," he said quietly. "I know, but I want to say I'm aware that part of the arrangement includes the expectation that this becomes real in some way. I'm not ignoring it." She made herself look at him. "I'm just not there yet. I need you to know that I'm being honest about that, not stalling." James held her gaze, and for one moment the careful composure of him slipped just enough that she saw something underneath it, something uncertain and real and unguarded. And it was the most honest she had seen him since that alcove at the Meridian. "I know," he said. "Okay," she said. She got out of the car. The following week was the week Elena started to lose her footing, and she would trace it later to a single Tuesday morning when she arrived at Whitaker Industries at James's request to review a document and found him in the middle of a meeting with 3 executives who were clearly trying to corner him into a decision he hadn't agreed to. She had been waiting outside the conference room when she heard his voice through the glass wall, measured immovable, not raising his voice once, and she had listened to him dismantle their argument with the precision of someone who had read every document in the room and understood it better than anyone who had written it. She had not expected to respect him. She had prepared for a lot of things about James Whitaker. She had prepared for arrogance. She had prepared for pressure. She had prepared for the specific brand of entitled charm that men with his net worth often wore like a second skin. She had not prepared to watch him refuse to back down under pressure from 3 men who were very deliberately trying to intimidate him, and to do it quietly and to be right. When the meeting ended and he came out of the conference room, he stopped when he saw her face. "What?" he said. "Nothing," Elena said. "You're looking at me like you've revised something." "I'm not." She stopped. The problem with James was that he paid attention. "I heard you in there. And you were right," she said, which cost her nothing except the admission itself. He studied her. "That bothers you." "It complicates things," she said carefully. "What things?" She picked up her bag and the document she had come to review. "The version of this arrangement that works for me is the one where you're easy to hold at arm's length," she said. "You being right makes that harder." She walked past him toward the elevator, and she heard him exhale behind her. Not a saw, not a laugh, something in between that she had no category for. And she pressed the elevator button and kept her back straight and did not turn around. But she thought about it on the drive home. She thought about the planner on her kitchen table. She thought about the way he had refilled her water glass without being asked. She thought about his voice saying, "I think I was in love with the idea of having someone I could trust completely," and the way his face had looked when he said it undefended just for a second, just enough. She thought about the feeling in her chest when she had watched him hold his ground in that conference room, and she named it clearly without flinching because she was Elena Hart, and she did not flinch from true things even when they were inconvenient. She was starting to see him. That was the problem. That was the thing she had not built into her calculations, the variable that Carol had tried to warn her about over the phone when she had used the phrase, "Do you understand what you're walking into?" She had said she did. She had believed she did. She had been wrong, and she was beginning to understand exactly how wrong, and the understanding arrived at the worst possible time, not at the end of dinner, not at a safe distance, but in the back of her own car on a Tuesday afternoon with no one watching, which meant she had nowhere to put the feeling, except somewhere inside herself, where she could feel it pressing against the walls she had built. She pressed harder on the gas. She focused on the road. She told herself that noticing a thing was not the same as being moved by it. She had said that before in her life. She had been wrong before too. That night, her phone buzzed with a message from James. It was not a long message. It said only, "The investors want a joint appearance at the Whitaker Foundation benefit in 3 weeks. Formal event. Wanted to give you more notice this time." Elena read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated, because at the bottom after his name, he had added a single line that had nothing to do with business. It said, "Thank you for what you said today. It mattered." She set her phone face down on the nightstand. She lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to the city outside her window. And she thought about a man who built skyscrapers and bought city blocks and had the entire infrastructure of power at his disposal, and who had still taken the time to write, "I think I was in love with the idea of trusting someone in the back of a car to a woman who had told him flat to his face that she was not going to perform for him." She thought about all of it, and she did not sleep for a long time. And she knew somewhere in the honest part of herself, she could never quite silence that the 12 months she had agreed to were not going to feel like 12 months. They were already not feeling like 12 months. They were starting to feel like something else entirely. Something without a clean exit clause, something that Carol Ewan could not review and mark up and hand back to her with suggested amendments. They were starting to feel like something real. The Whitaker Foundation benefit was 3 weeks away, and Elena spent the first of those weeks pretending she was fine, the second week knowing she wasn't, and the third week trying to decide what to do about the difference. She and James had developed a rhythm without either of them planning it. Tuesday and Thursday dinners, usually at his apartment now rather than restaurants, because Elena had pointed out that restaurants required performance, and his apartment did not, and he had agreed with the kind of immediate practicality that she was beginning to recognize as his primary language. He cooked on Thursdays. She had not expected that. He cooked simply and well, nothing elaborate, nothing designed to impress, and he set the table without fuss, and they ate and talked about things that had nothing to do with investors or contracts, and those Thursday evenings had become the quietest, steadiest part of her week, which was the most alarming thing she could have said about her own life. She was in the break room at Mercy General on a Wednesday morning, 12 days before the benefit, when Dana sat down across from her with the expression that meant she had information she was deciding how to deliver. "Just say it," Elena said without looking up from her coffee. "There's a photo," Dana said, "online from the investor dinner 3 weeks ago. Someone got a shot through the window of you and James in the car afterward. You can't see details clearly, but it's been identified. Someone tagged him. It's getting traction." Elena looked up. "What kind of traction?" "Gossip sites, a few of the business blogs. Someone's calling you the mystery woman. There's speculation." Dana put her phone on the table. "Nobody has your name yet, but Elena, somebody who knows him, is going to make the connection. And when they do..." "We knew this was going to happen eventually," Elena said. She said it steadily because she had thought about this, she had planned for this, it was in the contract. "This is actually fine. A controlled reveal is better than a leak. I'll call James." "That's the other thing," Dana said, her voice dropping slightly. The account that originally posted it, I can't confirm this, but someone in the comments section who seems to know things they shouldn't is dropping hints about an arrangement. Like they know it's not a real relationship. Elena went very still. What kind of hints? Phrases like, she didn't choose this and follow the money. Dana met her eyes. Elena, who knows about the contract? Carol, James's lawyers, James. She paused. And my parents. She had told her mother a partial truth, but not the contract, not the terms. Her mother assumed they were together. But her father knew that James had cleared the debt. She had told him 2 weeks into the arrangement because she had needed him to understand that the men were not coming back and why. She had told him it was a business agreement. She had thought he was too grateful and too ashamed to say anything. She had been wrong before. She was always wrong about her father. She called James from the hospital parking lot, standing in the cold with her coat half on because she needed the cold to keep her voice level. He picked up on the second ring. Elena, someone's leaking, she said, online. Comments about an arrangement following the money. James, I think it's my father. The silence on his end lasted exactly 4 seconds. Are you sure? No, but I know who has the right information and the wrong impulse control, and the list is short. She pressed her palm flat against her car the way she always did when she needed something solid. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for him, James said, and his voice was measured, but she could hear something underneath it, not anger, exactly more like the particular tension of a man who had been betrayed before and felt the shape of it in the air again. Where are you, hospital parking lot? I'm coming. James, you don't have to, Elena. His voice was quiet, final. I'm coming. He was there in 22 minutes. She was still in the parking lot. She had not gone back inside. She stood by her car and watched his car pull in. And when he got out and walked toward her, she had spent 22 minutes organizing herself, and she was organized, she was steady, and then he was standing in front of her and looking at her with that particular attention of his that saw things she hadn't put on the surface, and she felt the organization crack slightly at the edges. Tell me everything you told him, James said. I told him you'd settled the debt. I told him it was a business arrangement. I didn't tell him about terms. I didn't tell him the contract. I didn't tell him the timeline. She met his eyes. But I told him enough for someone to infer the rest if they were looking for it. He talked to someone, James said, or he posted it himself, or he was drinking with someone and it slipped. She heard her own voice go flat the way it always did when she talked about her father, the emotional equivalent of a patient stabilizing before they deteriorated. He doesn't do it to hurt people. He just doesn't understand consequences. He never has. This has consequences, James said. I know. She looked at him. What's the exposure? He ran a hand along the back of his neck, the first restless gesture she had ever seen from him, and she filed it away the way she filed away all the small true things about him. If it stays speculation manageable, if someone gets your name and connects it to the debt clearing, my board is going to want answers. My investors will want answers. And the story becomes, billionaire buys himself a wife, which is the truth, Elena said quietly. He looked at her. It's part of the truth. James, don't. She shook her head. I know what this started as. Don't soften it right now, because right now I need to think clearly, and I can't do that if we're rewriting history. I'm not rewriting anything. His voice was sharper than she expected, and that surprised her. She had not heard him sharp before, not with her. I'm telling you that 12 weeks ago was not the same thing as right now, and treating them as identical is its own kind of dishonesty. She stared at him in the cold parking lot, her coat still half on, and something landed in her chest that she wasn't prepared for. Not because he was wrong, because he wasn't. What do you want to do? She asked. I want to get ahead of it, he said. Controlled reveal like you said. We announced not an announcement, no press release, but a coordinated visibility. The foundation benefit is 12 days out. We go. We're photographed. We're real. If the story breaks before then, we're already ahead of it. And my father, James looked at her. That's your call to make, not mine. She called her father that evening. She had driven home, first changed out of her scrubs, made tea she didn't drink, and then sat at her kitchen table with her phone in her hand for 7 minutes before dialing. Her father picked up on the fifth ring, which meant he had seen her name, and spent 4 rings deciding whether to answer. Elena, he started. Dad, she said, stop. Before you say anything else, just tell me yes or no. Did you talk to anyone about James Whitaker? The pause was all the answer she needed. It lasted too long and breathed too heavily and carried the specific weight of a man who was sorry before he'd even confirmed the thing he was sorry for. I didn't mean for it to get out like that, he said. I was at Richie's place and we were talking and I'd had a few and I said my daughter was taken care of, that somebody important had stepped in and taken care of things. And Richie, he asked questions and I didn't think he would. Richie Morales, Elena said. Richie Morales, who has a Facebook with 3,000 followers? Elena. Richie Morales, who posts everything. Richie, who is why Mom stopped telling anyone when we were going on vacation, because he literally announced it publicly and we came home to a broken back window. Her voice was very flat, very controlled. This was the voice she used when she was angry enough that if she let any of it into her tone, it would all come out at once and nothing good would happen after that. Dad, I know, he said. I know, baby, I know. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You are always sorry, Elena said. That's the thing. You are genuinely, sincerely, thoroughly sorry every single time. And then 6 months later, I'm standing in a parking lot at work having a conversation I should never have had to have. She stopped. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a second. I love you, and I am so tired. Do you understand how tired I am? Elena, don't, she said softly. Don't apologize again. I can't hear another apology tonight. Just stay home. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Just be quiet until I figure out how to fix this. She hung up and sat in her kitchen for a long time. Dana texted at 9:30. The gossip had a name. Elena Hart. Someone had connected the gala to the foundation to the hospital. By 10 p.m., her Instagram had 400 new followers she did not recognize. By 11, a tabloid site had run a short piece with her name and photo, and the headline, Who is Elena Hart, the woman behind billionaire James Whitaker's sudden love story? She did not sleep. James called at 7 the next morning. It's out. I know. My board chair called me at 6. What did you tell him? I told him I'd address it at Thursday's meeting. He paused. Elena, I need you to come to that meeting. She had a shift Thursday. She had already started reworking it in her head. What time? 2 p.m. I can be there at 2:15. 2:15 is fine. Another pause, and this one had a different texture, less operational. Are you all right? I'm a nurse, she said. I'm always functional. That's not what I asked. She exhaled. No, she said honestly. I'm not all right. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep, and I'm furious at my father, and I'm watching my name appear on websites I've never heard of, and I have to go to a board meeting and look like I chose this. She stopped. I did choose this. That's the complicated part. Elena. His voice was quiet and steady, and it did something to her, that steadiness it always did, and she was less and less able to pretend it didn't. We're going to handle this, was. I know, she said. I know we are. She said we. She noticed that she said we. She filed it away and said goodbye and went to make more coffee. The board meeting was 11 people in a room that cost more per square foot than her apartment. Elena walked in at 2:14 still in her work clothes because she had come straight from the hospital and had changed her blouse in the Whitaker Industries lobby bathroom, and she sat down beside James at a table full of people who were watching her with the careful attention of people who had opinions they had not yet decided to voice. The board chair, a trim man in his 60s named Arthur Voss, opened by saying, I think we'd all like some clarity on the nature of your relationship, James, given the current media environment. I'd be happy to provide it, James said, and he turned to Elena in a way that was smooth and natural and completely intentional and said, Elena, she had not known he was going to hand it to her. For one fraction of a second, she held the surprise, and then she put it down because she was Elena Hart, and she had been holding things together under pressure since she was 11 years old, and this room was not going to break that record. James and I have been together for several months. She said, her voice clear and even. We met through the foundation. We kept it private because I value my professional privacy, And because neither of us had any interest in performing for an audience before we understood what we were ourselves. She looked at Arthur Voss directly. I'm a nurse. I'm a Columbia MBA. I have no financial interest in Whitaker Industries and no intention of acquiring one. If there's a specific concern about my presence in James's life that relates to his fitness to lead this company, I'd invite you to ask it directly. The room was quiet. Arthur Voss looked at her for a long moment. No specific concern, he said carefully. We simply want to know that the situation is stable. The situation is stable, James said, his voice final in the way that closed conversations. After the meeting, standing in the corridor outside, James said very quietly, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Elena said. It was the right move. You handled it better than I expected. James, I manage terrified people and their families for a living. A boardroom is just terrified people in better suits. She looked at him. Arthur Voss is afraid of instability. He's not afraid of me. Once he understood I wasn't a liability, he was done. James looked at her with that particular focused expression that meant he was seeing something and filing it away. You're very good at reading people. Occupational requirement. They were standing close in the corridor narrow, and she was tired in the way that strips the last of the distance you keep around yourself, and she did not move away, and he did not either. The benefit is 10 days out, he said. I know. This story is going to be louder between now and then. I know that too. Are you still? He stopped. Started again. Elena, are you still in this? She looked at him, and the honest part of her that she could never quite silence was already answering before her brains caught up to it. Yes, she said, I'm still in this. He exhaled, not relief exactly, something deeper than relief, something that looked like a man who had been expecting a different answer for long enough that the right one took a moment to register. Okay, he said, but James says. She made herself hold his gaze. If there is anything else, I don't know anything about how this arrangement was set up, anything about the people my father borrowed from, anything that has a bearing on what we are doing. I need to know it now, before that benefit, because I cannot walk into a room of 400 people and have someone tell me something I wasn't prepared for. He looked at her steadily, too steadily. She had learned his face well enough by now to know when it was working. James, there's one thing, and he said, and there it was. The shift in the air, the specific weight of an admission that had been waiting. Tell me, she said, the men your father borrowed from, he said slowly, they're not unconnected to me, not directly, but one of them is a former business partner whose relationship with me ended badly 18 months ago. He paused. His name is Victor Crane. He and I had a development deal that collapsed, and he blamed me for it, and he has spent the time since looking for ways to complicate my life. Elena stared at him. Victor Crane arranged the loan to my father. I don't know if he arranged it or if it was coincidence, James said, and she could hear in his voice that he thought it was not coincidence, that he had thought it through and landed on not coincidence and had been carrying that conclusion alone. I found out 2 weeks after I settled the debt. By then the contract was signed. You found out 2 weeks after we signed, Elena said very carefully, that the entire situation that led to the contract may have been engineered by someone who wanted to use my father to get to you. Yes, she turned away from him. She walked to the window at the end of the corridor and stood there with her back to him, breathing slowly, counting her heartbeats the way she did when she needed her hands to stay steady. 7, 8, 9. Elena, give me a minute. She was not yelling. She was not going to yell. She was doing the thing she always did, the thing she had done since she was 11 years old, with her mother counting dollar bills on the counter. She was holding it together because the alternative was falling apart, and falling apart did not fix anything, and she had never once in her life been able to afford it. She turned back around. Her voice was very even. My father didn't just stumble into a debt, she said. He was a tool. Someone put him in a position where the only person who could save him was you. And they did it knowing I was the person who would do anything to protect my family. They put me in that room with you. Possibly, James said. I don't have confirmation. But you believe it. He said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Elena felt something cold move through her, not cold toward James, cold toward the entirety of it, the gala, The document, the table with the folded paper, the careful negotiations she had been so proud of herself for conducting. She had walked into that room thinking she was the one with clear eyes, the one who knew exactly what she was agreeing to, and someone had written the room before she arrived. "Were you part of it?" she asked, and she heard herself ask it, and she knew it was the question she had to ask even though it cost something to say it out loud. James looked like he had been struck. It was the most unguarded she had ever seen him. Not the almost smile, not the flash of something real in the car, but the full direct impact of a question that had gone somewhere that hurt. "No," he said. She watched his face. She had 16 years of watching faces in high-stakes moments. Patients lying about their pain levels. Families lying to themselves about diagnoses. She had become very accurate. "I know," she said quietly. "I had to ask." "I know you did," he said, and his voice was rough in a way it hadn't been before. They stood there, both of them, holding the weight of it, and Elena thought about 12 months and contracts and exit clauses and Carol Ewan's voice saying, "Do you understand what you're walking into?" And she thought about Thursday dinners and a leather planner and a man who refilled her water glass and told her she looked fine when she was exhausted, which was the truest compliment she had received in years. And she thought about Victor Crane, whoever he was, and whatever he had built around them, without their knowledge, in the particular fury of realizing that someone had looked at her love for her family and decided it was a lever. Nobody got to use that as a lever. "Who is Victor Crane?" she said, "and what does he want from you?" James looked at her. Something shifted in his posture, not relief, not gratitude exactly, but the particular realignment of a man who had been standing alone on a problem for long enough that the presence of someone standing next to him changed the shape of it. "He wants the Meridian Project," James said. "A development deal worth $2 billion that was supposed to be ours jointly. When our partnership dissolved, I retained the rights. He's been trying to find leverage to renegotiate ever since. And destabilizing your personal life destabilizes your board, which weakens your position on the project." "Yes." Elena nodded slowly. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead, the way she did in a code situation, triage and sequence, and what can be done right now. "He didn't expect us to actually become functional," she said. James blinked. "No, I don't think he did." "Then that's the thing," she said. "That's what we have that he didn't account for." She met his eyes, and she was steady now. Fully steady, the storm passed, and clarity arrived in its place. "He used my father to put me in a room with you. He thought I'd be desperate enough to be controllable, and that you'd have a wife in name only who would never actually matter to you. He built a trap and put 2 people in it who don't behave the way he predicted." James was looking at her like she had said something that rearranged something inside him. "Elena, don't," she said, not unkindly. "Not right now. Right now, we need to talk about what we're going to do about Victor Crane before he does something else." "The benefit," James said. "The benefit," she agreed. "If he's watching, and he is watching, he's going to try something there. Public high-profile maximum damage." She straightened. "So we need to be ready." "We," James said, and it was barely a word, just a breath of one, but it carried the whole weight of the last 12 weeks. "Yes," Elena said, "we." She did not examine it further. She did not pull back from it. She let it stand between them in that corridor for exactly as long as it took for both of them to understand what it meant, and then she said, "Call Carol. I want to know every legal option we have around Crane before Friday." She walked toward the elevator. She heard James behind her, not following, just moving in the same direction, which had become somewhere in the last 12 weeks, its own kind of gravitational fact. The elevator arrived. They stepped in together. And for once, Elena did not stare at her own reflection. She looked straight ahead, and in the brief silence before the doors opened to the lobby, James's hand found hers, not grasping, not demanding, just there, his fingers settling beside hers, like they had been going to do it all along and had simply been waiting for the right moment. She did not pull away. The doors opened. They stepped out together. And somewhere across the city, in a way neither of them could see yet, Victor Crane was already making his next move. Carol Ewan called at 8:15 the next morning, before Elena had finished her first cup of coffee, and her voice had the particular pitch of someone who had been working since 6 a.m. and had found something that required immediate conversation. "Victor Crane," Carol said. "I spent last night pulling everything publicly available on him. Elena, this man is not someone who makes amateur moves. He's been in litigation with 4 former partners in the last 7 years, and he has won 3 of those cases. Not because he was right, because he is patient and he is thorough and he waits for people to make mistakes and then he dismantles them. What's his angle on James? Elena asked. The Meridian project is worth $2.3 billion in projected revenue over a decade. Crane's claim is that he contributed proprietary market research to the original partnership that James used to secure the zoning approvals. He wants either a 30% stake or a cash settlement of $400 million. Carol paused. He has no legal standing for either. James's lawyers have been clear on that. But Crane doesn't need legal standing if he can make James's board nervous enough to pressure a private settlement. And a scandal about James's personal life makes the board nervous. A scandal about a contractual marriage makes the board terrified, Carol said. Elena, if the full terms of your arrangement become public, not speculation, actual terms, James's board will call an emergency session. His investors will start making noise. And a man defending his personal life cannot simultaneously defend a $2 billion development project. Elena set down her coffee cup. So Crane's endgame isn't destroying the relationship. He doesn't care about the relationship. He wants James distracted and weakened before the Meridian project goes to final approval. When is final approval? 6 weeks, Elena said, because James had told her this the previous evening when they had sat in his kitchen until midnight, going through everything they knew, and she had taken notes in the leather planner he had sent her, which she was no longer willing to find significant, but which was sitting on his counter and not her own kitchen table. And she had noticed that and noted it and moved on. Then Crane has 6 weeks to do maximum damage, Carol said, and he has already started. Elena, there's a piece going up today, a financial blog, not a tabloid. Someone gave them the outline of the contract structure. Not the document itself, but enough detail that it reads like someone with first-hand knowledge. And Elena stood up from the kitchen table. How much detail? The debt settlement, the 12-month timeline, the stipend. Carol's voice was careful. Not the personal terms, but enough. Who had that information? Elena said, thinking out loud. Carol, who in your office? Not my office, Carol said immediately. My team is airtight, but Elena James' legal team drafted the original document. 3 lawyers and 2 paralegals had that document before you countersigned. The implication landed. Someone inside Whitaker Industries, Elena said. Or someone Crane has been cultivating inside Whitaker Industries for a long time, Carol said. This did not happen overnight. Elena called James before she had her coat on. He answered on the first ring, which meant he had already seen it. I know, he said. Carol thinks it's internal. My head of legal is already pulling access logs on the document. Whoever it is, I will find them. His voice was contained, but she had learned the sound of his composure by now learned the difference between natural and forced, and this was forced in the way of a man holding something very hot and being very deliberate about not dropping it. Elena, I need to ask you something. Ask it. Do you want to step back from the benefit given how exposed? No, she said flatly. Elena, James, listen to me. She kept her voice level and direct. If we step back now, Crane wins the optics before he's won anything else. We go. We go, and we are exactly what we have been for the last 12 weeks, which is 2 people who started with a contract and ended up somewhere that is nobody's business but ours. We let the benefit speak for itself. A pause, long enough that she counted her own heartbeats. You're sure? I'm sure. The article goes up in 2 hours, he said. By tonight, your name is going to be in every financial news cycle alongside mine, and the story is going to be unkind. James, I have worked double shifts for 16 years. I have watched people get news that broke them and then held their hands while they decided to keep going anyway. An unkind article that's not going to be the thing that moves me. Another pause, shorter. All right, he said. There's something else. She waited. My assistant Sophie flagged something this morning. Victor Crane RSVP'd to the foundation benefits 6 days ago. He's been on the guest list the whole time he donated to the foundation 2 years ago, standard rotating invitation. Nobody flagged it because nobody was thinking about him in relation to the event. James's voice was very even. He's going to be in the room. The cold settled into Elena's chest. Not fear. Something more precise than fear. He's going to try to do it in person? That's my read. Then we need to be ready before we walk in, she said. Not reactive, ready. She was already thinking and already moving through it the way she moved through a complex patient situation, prioritized sequence act. Can you find out what he knows specifically before the benefit? I can try, James said. I have people. Find out what he has, Elena said, and meet me Thursday for dinner. We plan it out then. It's only Wednesday. Then I'll see you tomorrow, she said. James, us? Yeah. Don't let your board read the article without context from you first. Get ahead of it. Call Arthur Voss before it posts. She paused. You know this. I'm just saying it out loud. I know, he said. Elena, he stopped. What? Nothing, he said. I'll see you tomorrow. She hung up and stood in her own kitchen with the phone in her hand, and the thing he hadn't said sat in the air between her and the morning like a sentence waiting to be finished. The article posted at 10:17 a.m. Elena read it once in the break room at Mercy General during a 7-minute gap between patients. It was precise and cool and written in the specific tone of something that had been carefully researched and was being presented as neutral while being designed to injure. It used the word arrangement 4 times. It quoted no sources by name. It described the debt settlement as a transaction and referred to Elena as a calculated choice, which was a phrase that James had said to her face in a restaurant 12 weeks ago, and which she had turned over in her head many times since. And seeing it in print now felt like something had been taken from a private room and put on a billboard. She put her phone in her pocket and went back to work. At 2 p.m., she had a patient, a 73-year-old retired school teacher named May, who had been admitted for a cardiac event and who, in the manner of certain older women who have seen everything, had apparently also read the article and recognized Elena's name from her hospital badge. You're her, May said when Elena came to check her chart. The woman from that article. Elena looked up. I am. Are you all right? May asked. It was such a simple question, such a direct, uncomplicated question offered without agenda, and Elena found herself completely unprepared for it. She had been asked if she was functional. She had told herself she was steady. Nobody had asked if she was all right. I'm working on it, Elena said honestly. May studied her with the sharp eyes of someone who had spent decades reading the faces of children who were lying. He loves you, she said. The way you talk about being in it together, that's not a contract. Elena looked at the chart in her hands. May, I needed you to focus onto your heart rate. My heart rate is 72 and stable, May said. Yours is the one I'm worried about. Elena made a note in the chart and did not answer because May was not wrong, and she was not ready to say that out loud in a hospital room to a 73-year-old stranger. Thursday dinner was quieter than usual. James had picked up food she had arrived to find containers on the counter, which meant he had not cooked, which meant he had not had the kind of day that left room for cooking. She noticed these things about him now without deciding to notice them. She noticed the way he held his coffee cup when he was thinking. She noticed the specific stillness that came over him when someone said something that landed close to something real. She noticed that he laughed rarely, but when he did, it was in response to things that were actually funny and not things that were merely expected to be funny, and she had started privately collecting those moments the way you collect rare things. Crane has a copy of the document, James said when they were sitting at the table. Not the original, the contract. My legal team traced the access. One of the paralegals who worked on the original draft was a former Crane associate. She's been terminated, but the damage is done. Elena absorbed this. He has the full terms, including the compatibility clause. James's jaw tightened. Yes. Elena set down her fork. He's going to use it at the benefit. That's what I think, James said. Not a press release, not another article. He's going to say it directly in public in front of the right people where the damage is immediate and there's no news cycle to manage because it's already happened. What's his move specifically? He'll approach us. He'll make a comment, something that's technically ambiguous but that anyone standing nearby will understand. He'll make me respond or he'll make me not respond, and either way, it looks like he has something over me. James looked at her across the table. He needs me reactive. The moment I'm reactive, I've confirmed there's something to react to. So you don't react, Elena said. Easier said than proven in the moment, James said, and there was a rawness in that which she respected the honesty of a man saying, I know my own weak points. Then I react, Tita, Elena said. He looked at her. What do you mean? I mean that you standing in front of Victor Crane at that benefit is exactly the fight he designed. He knows your pressure points. He's been studying you for 18 months. He knows how to make you respond. She met James' eyes. He doesn't know me. He has a document. He has speculation. He has a narrative he built out of a loan and a gala and an opportunistic paralegal. But he has never spent 60 seconds in the same room as me. And that is the thing he didn't calculate. James was very still. Elena, I'm not reckless, she said. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm telling you that if Victor Crane approaches us at that benefit and says whatever he's planning to say, you let me answer him. She kept her voice measured and direct. Because I am someone who has spent 16 years answering questions under pressure, while someone's life was in the balance, and I am not afraid of a man in a tuxedo who thinks he has leverage over me. James looked at her for a long moment. He may say something about the contract that's humiliating. I know. Publicly humiliating. James. She leaned forward slightly. He took my father's weakness and turned it into a mechanism to control me. He looked at my family and decided it was a tool. I am not going to sit quietly while he uses it. Her voice was steady and certain. Let me answer him. The silence stretched between them, and then James said quietly, okay. The benefit was on a Saturday. Elena spent Friday working a morning shift and then sitting with Carol for 2 hours going through every possible angle, every legal tripwire, every word Crane might use and what the most effective response to each would be. Carol was meticulous and brilliant, and at the end of their meeting she said, Elena, you are one of the most tactically clear people I have ever worked with. I'm a nurse, Elena said. I'm used to thinking fast in situations where being wrong costs something real. Saturday came the way important days always do, with the particular weight of a morning that knows what the evening is going to ask of it. James came to her apartment to pick her up, which was the first time he had done so, and she opened the door in the green dress she had bought specifically for this night, not borrowed, not compromised, her own choice, her own money. And he looked at her with an expression that was not managed or calculated and said nothing for exactly 2 seconds. You look, he started. Don't, she said, but not unkindly. I was going to say formidable, he said. She looked at him. Oh, is that all right? That's better than fine, she said and meant it, and he almost smiled. Not almost this time, it arrived fully briefly, and she felt it like a small weather event. They rode to the benefit in the same car, sitting close but not quite touching, and the city moved past the windows the way it always did when she was with him, faster somehow. More present. She had noticed that too, and filed it away under the growing category of things she was no longer pretending not to notice. The Whitaker Foundation benefit was held in the same Meridian Hotel ballroom, where this had all started, which Elena recognized as either irony or the universe being unimaginative. 400 guests, 18-foot ceilings, the kind of event where everyone in the room was performing their own version of normal while watching everyone else do the same. James moved through the room with the ease of someone who had been doing this for decades. He introduced her without fanfare and without over-explaining what she had coached him on, because over-explaining was what people did when they were defensive, and defensiveness was what Crane was counting on. She stayed beside him and was herself direct, warm when she meant it, quiet when she didn't, and absolutely not performing. For the first hour, nothing happened. She ate one piece of past appetizer. She spoke with a cardiologist from Mount Sinai who turned out to be interesting. James came to find her when he had been pulled away briefly, arriving at her elbow with 2 glasses of sparkling water, which she accepted and their fingers touched during the handoff, and neither of them commented on it. And then at 9:47 by the clock on the far wall, she felt James's posture shift beside her. Not much, just the fractional recalibration of someone who has located a threat, and she turned and saw the man approaching them. Victor Crane was shorter than she had imagined. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the particular smoothness of someone who had always been good in rooms. He smiled as he approached them, and the smile had the practiced warmth of something that had never been connected to actual warmth. James, he said, extending a hand, it's been too long. James shook it. His face was a wall. Victor. Crane turned to Elena with the smile fully deployed. And you must be the remarkable Ms. Hart. I've read so much about you recently. Most of it written by people who don't know me, Elena said pleasantly. Crane laughed. It was the laugh of a man who respected a parry. Quite right. Journalism is a messy business. He took a sip of his drink. I have to say, James, I admire the creativity of the arrangement. Not everyone would think to solve a personal problem and a business problem simultaneously. Very efficient. The word arrangement. Deliberate. Loud enough for the two people standing nearby to hear. Elena felt the moment land and felt James go very still beside her, and she took exactly one breath. Every relationship starts somewhere, Elena said, her voice easy and conversational. James and I started with a problem that needed solving. Most of the people in this room married someone they met because of proximity or convenience or some form of practical circumstance. We just happened to be honest about ours. She smiled at Crane with the specific smile she used when a family member was being obstructive and she needed them to move. I find people who think that makes us less real are usually uncomfortable with honesty in general. Crane looked at her. Something behind his eyes recalibrated. He had not expected her to claim it. He had expected deflection or discomfort. Not a woman who would pick up the word arrangement and hand it back to him before he had finished deploying it. How refreshingly candid, he said. I'm a nurse, Elena said. Candor is professional protocol. Indeed. Crane looked at James. And the business side of things, James, I understand the Meridian approval is coming up. 6 weeks, isn't it? 5, James said. You must have a great deal on your mind. Crane let the sentence sit there with its implied weight, the suggestion of a man stretched, thin, distracted, vulnerable. I have exactly as much on my mind as the project requires, James said, and a great deal less on my mind than I did 18 months ago. He looked at Crane with the full, unhurried steadiness that Elena had watched flatten a conference room of intimidating men. Because 18 months ago, I was still trying to understand why a man I considered a partner was willing to spend a year constructing a mechanism to compromise my personal life in order to apply pressure to a business negotiation. He tilted his head slightly. That's been clarified now. Crane's face did not move. A good face, Elena noted, but the stillness of it was working too hard. Clarified how? Crane said. My legal team has been thorough, James said simply. My board has been briefed. My investors are aware of the background of your interest in Meridian. He paused. I wanted you to know that before this evening concluded, as a courtesy. Crane looked between them. Elena watched him process at the fact that James had arrived at this event, not off balance, but prepared that the woman beside him had not crumbled under the word arrangement, but had turned it around before he finished the sentence, that the move he had been building for 18 months had arrived at its destination and found the destination not empty. I see you've been busy, Crane said. We've both been busy, Elena said. The difference is that we've been busy building something. There was a beat of silence that was more eloquent than most conversations. Then Crane smiled. The performed smile said it was lovely to meet her, told James they should have lunch sometime, and walked away. Elena tracked him with her eyes until he was absorbed into the far side of the room. Then she exhaled slowly through her nose. James's hand was at the small of her back. She was not sure when it had arrived there. It was light and steady, and she did not move away from it. That was, he started. Don't tell me it was impressive, she said. I was going to say it was exactly right, he said. She turned to look at him. His face was still contained, still composed, but the composure was different now. Not constructed, just settled like a man who had put something down after carrying it for too long. Is it over? She said. The board has everything. Legal has the paralegal on record. Crane has nothing left that we haven't already accounted for. He looked at her. It's over. She nodded. She felt the tension leaving her body by degrees, the specific unwinding of someone who has been braced for impact and has come through the other side. She was aware of his hands still at her back and aware of the 400 people in the room and aware of none of it in equal measure. I want to leave, she said. Yes, he said. They said the necessary goodbyes. They walked out of the ballroom together through the lobby, through the same door Elena had walked through 3 months ago in a borrowed dress, calculating the earliest polite moment to escape. She walked through it now in her own dress beside a man she had signed a contract to pretend to love, and the pretending had somewhere along the way become the most honest thing in her life. In the car, she sat beside him in the quiet, and neither of them spoke for a block, and then two. The city moved past them. His hand found hers in the space between them, the same way it had in the elevator corridor 2 weeks ago, not asking, just arriving like it had always been going to end up there. She looked down at their hands. James, she said. Elena. The 12 months, she said, the contract. What about it? I need you to know. She stopped, started again. The honest part of her that she could never silence was all the way awake now, and she had run out of the energy to argue with it. I need you to know that whatever the contract says, what I said in there to Crane was true. We started with a problem. And she paused. I don't care about the exit clause. I'm telling you that plainly because I don't perform, and I said I wouldn't. I don't care about the exit clause anymore. James turned to look at her in the moving dark of the car, and his face was open in the way she had only seen it a handful of times, the walls down, the careful composure set aside, and he looked like exactly what he was, a man who had been alone for long enough that the presence of someone real had gotten under his defenses without either of them quite deciding that was allowed. Neither do I, he said. She felt the words settle into her the way good things do, not with fireworks, not with the dramatic punctuation of a scene that knows it's being watched, just solidly, truly, the way real things feel when they arrive. She squeezed his hand, he squeezed back. Outside the window, the city continued its long, indifferent, luminous business. Inside the car, something that had started as a contract and a desperate phone call and a folded document on a white linen tablecloth had arrived at something neither of them had written into any clause. Something that needed no lawyer's signature because it had already been signed in every dinner, every honest answer, every moment. One of them had told the truth when they could have managed the impression instead. They were not at the end of anything. Elena understood that clearly. Victor Crane was still in that ballroom. The world would still have opinions. Her father would always be her father. And she and James had barely begun the long, complicated, necessary work of becoming people who trusted each other without a contract requiring it. But they were going to do that work. She was certain of it in the way she was certain of very few things with her whole body, with the part of her that had always known the difference between a lie she was managing and a truth she was living. She was done managing this one. The morning after the benefit, Elena woke up in her own apartment, in her own bed, and lay there for a long time staring at the ceiling with the particular stillness of someone whose internal landscape has shifted overnight and who is taking inventory of the new terrain. She had told James she didn't care about the exit clause. He had said, neither do I. They had ridden back across the city, holding hands in the quiet, and when the car had stopped in front of her building, he had walked her to the door, and she had looked at him on that doorstep and felt the full weight of everything. They were contract and consequence, debt and honesty, a borrowed dress and a leather planner, and 12 weeks of Thursday dinners that had built something neither of them had planned for. And she had said goodnight, and he had said goodnight, and that had been exactly right, because the best things do not need to be rushed into the next moment. They are patient. They wait for you to be ready. She was almost ready. What she was not ready for was the phone call she received at 9:17 that morning from a number she didn't recognize. And when she answered it, the voice on the other end was smooth and even and introduced itself as the communications director for Victor Crane. Ms. Hart, the woman said. Mr. Crane would like to offer you an opportunity to tell your side of the story. He's connected with a journalist at the Financial Register who is prepared to run a full-profile sympathetic framing your perspective centered. Mr. Crane believes you may have been placed in an unfair position by Mr. Whitaker and that the public deserves to understand that. Elena stood in her kitchen in the specific silence of someone who has been handed a trap wrapped in consideration. She recognized it because she had watched Crane deploy a version of it the night before the extended hand, the performed concern, the move designed to look like help and function like a lever. Tell Mr. Crane, Elena said, her voice pleasant and unhurried, that I don't require his advocacy, and if the Financial Register runs anything that misrepresents my position, my attorney will be in contact before the piece clears editorial review. She paused. Also tell him that I said good morning. She hung up and immediately called James. He answered on the first ring. I know, he said. She called my office 7 minutes ago with a similar offer. He's not done, Elena said. He's not done, James confirmed. But he's running out of original moves. This is a pressure tactic, not a strategy. He wants one of us to break rank and give him a usable quote before the meridian approval. His voice was steady. We don't give him one. Agreed. Elena poured her cold coffee down the drain and started a fresh pot. What's the timeline on the approval? 5 weeks, 2 days, James said. My legal team is filing the final documentation Monday. Once it's in, Crane has no procedural ground to contest it. His only remaining option is public pressure, and public pressure requires a story. We stop being a story, he has nothing. How do we stop being a story? We become boring, he said, and there was something in his voice, not quite a smile, but the shape of one. Two people in an ordinary relationship who go to work and have dinner and do not respond to provocations. Very dull. Very unproductive for a man looking for conflict. Elena found herself almost smiling too, which was its own small event. I can do boring. I know, he said. Elena. His voice shifted, became less operational. About last night. James, I'm not going to make this complicated, he said. I just want to say that what you said in the car, I've been carrying it since you said it. I want you to know that. She stood in her kitchen with the fresh coffee brewing and the morning light coming through the window, and she let the words sit in her chest where they landed and did not deflect them or analyze them or file them away. Okay, she said, I know. Dinner Thursday, he said. Dinner Thursday, she agreed. The weeks that followed were quieter than anything that had come before them, and quiet, Elena discovered, was its own kind of test. Crisis was manageable. Crisis had a shape and a sequence and required action, and action was the thing she was best at. Quiet required something different, and it required her to sit with things instead of solving them, to be present instead of tactical, and to acknowledge in the privacy of her own head that the feelings she had been filing away for 3 months under various clinical categories were simply feelings, and they were hers, and they were not going anywhere. James cooked on Thursday. She brought wine she had chosen herself not to impress just because she had a preference, and she was done underplaying it. They ate at his kitchen table and talked about the meridian filing and about a difficult patient she'd had on Wednesday, and about her mother who had called Elena 3 times that week, twice to check on her, and once to say in the careful voice of a woman who was hoping she wasn't overstepping that whoever James Whitaker was, he sounded like someone who paid attention. She called you perceptive, Elena told him. Your mother, he said. She didn't say perceptive. She said he sounds like he actually listens, which in my mother's vocabulary means the same thing. Elena looked at her wine glass. She wants to meet you. Do you want her to meet me? He asked. She thought about it honestly. Yes, she said. Not because of the arrangement, because I want her to see what's real. James was quiet for a moment. Then invite her to dinner. Here, I'll cook. She's going to love you, Elena said, and then heard herself say it, and the naturalness of it, the ease, the absence of irony, hit her somewhere mid-chest. She had said it the way you say it about someone who is yours, the way you say it when you are not performing. James heard it too. She could tell by the way he went very still and then deliberately picked up his fork, giving her the space to have said it without turning it into a moment she had to manage. It was the most considerate thing he had done since the planner, and the list was long by now. She did not take it back. She let it stand. 4 weeks after the benefit on a Tuesday afternoon that had given no indication of being significant, Carol called. It's done, Carol said. Crane's communications director sent a retraction request to the Financial Register for the original piece. The blog that ran the first article has pulled its content, and Crane's legal team has formally withdrawn from any inquiry related to the Meridian project. Whatever your lawyer said to his lawyers on Friday, it worked. Elena sat down in the chair nearest to her. Say that again. Victor Crane has gone quiet, Carol said. My read is that James's legal team gave him a formal accounting of everything they had, the paralegal, the loan, the communications to your father, and Crane calculated that pushing further put him at greater legal exposure than walking away. He's a smart man. Smart men know when the cost of winning is too high. It's over, Elena said. The Crane chapter is over, Carol said. The rest is yours to write. She paused. Elena, I want to say something as your lawyer and also as someone who has known you for 6 years. Go ahead. I was worried about you when you signed that contract, Carol said. I was worried you were doing the thing you always do, solving everyone else's problem and paying for it yourself. And I won't pretend I wasn't watching to see if this man was going to be one more thing you had to carry. A pause. He's not, is he? Elena thought about Thursday dinners. She thought about a man who had stood in a corridor and told her that 12 weeks ago was not the same thing as right now. She thought about a hand finding hers in the dark of a car without asking permission and not needing to. No, she said. He's not. Good, Carol said. Then you should probably go tell him the news yourself. She drove to Whitaker Industries. She had not called ahead. She had not planned it. She had simply got in her car and driven the way you drive toward the things you are no longer equivocating about. James's assistant, Sophie, looked up when she walked in and had the particular expression of someone who had been watching a situation develop for months and was privately rooting for a specific outcome. He's in a call, Sophie said, but it's almost done. I'll wait, Elena said. She waited for 4 minutes in the corridor outside his office, and then the door opened and James came out, saw her, and stopped. Elena, he said, what happened? Crane withdrew. She said, all of it, the articles, the Meridian inquiry, everything. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved through his face, not the almost smile this time, the full one, unguarded and sudden, and it changed him completely. And she stood there and let herself see it. Come in, he said. She followed him into the office and he closed the door behind them. And for a moment they just stood there, absorbing the fact that the last obstacle had removed itself from the field, and what remained was simply them and the choices they made from this point forward, uncomplicated by contracts and leverage and 12-month timelines and men who turned love into leverage. I called my mother, Elena said. Before I drove here, I told her to come to dinner Saturday. He looked at her. Saturday. Yes. And James, I called Carol after and she's revising the contract. She held his gaze. Not to enforce the exit clause, to dissolve the financial terms, the stipend, the settlement figure. I don't want them anymore. I want the document to say what this actually is, which is nothing I can quantify in dollars. He was very still. Elena, I'm not doing this because you need me to, she said. I'm doing it because the contract was written for a version of this that no longer exists, and I want to be here in whatever this is without a document telling me what it's worth. She paused. I know that complicates things legally. Carol will manage it. I just need you to know where I'm standing. James looked at her across the office, across all of it, across the distance between a woman in a borrowed dress at a gala who had shaken with anger in an elevator, and a man who had handed a stranger a folded document and called it a solution. And he crossed that distance in 3 steps, and he held her face in his hands, and she let him. And he said very quietly, I've known where you were standing for a long time. I was waiting for you to know it too. She put her hands over his. I know it now, she said. He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and it was not performed for anyone's benefit and not calculated for any investor's comfort, and it was the most uncontracted thing she had done in years. Saturday dinner was the loudest evening Elena could remember in a long time. Her mother arrived with a dish she had spent the afternoon making, and her presence immediately shifted the entire gravity of James's kitchen from its usual quiet efficiency into something warmer and more chaotic and more alive. Her mother asked James questions directly and without apology. Where did he grow up? Did he know how to apologize when he was wrong? What did he think about when he couldn't sleep? And James answered all of them with the same unhurried honesty that Elena had taken 3 months to earn from him, which told her everything she needed to know about who he was when he had decided to trust someone. Her mother pulled Elena into the kitchen at one point on the pretext of checking on the dish and looked at her with the eyes of a woman who had spent decades reading her daughter's face through every variety of difficulty. He's real, her mother said. Mom. I'm not asking, her mother said. I'm telling you, he's real and you are Elena. You look different. I look the same, Elena said. You look like someone who put something down, her mother said quietly. You've been carrying things since you were a little girl. You look like you finally put it down. Elena opened her mouth and closed it again and felt something in her chest that had no name she was willing to say out loud in a kitchen on a Saturday. But her mother saw it anyway and reached over and squeezed her hand without making a production of it, which was exactly what Elena needed. They ate dinner, all three of them, and it was loud and real. And James refilled her mother's water glass the same way he had always refilled Elena's, automatically and without ceremony. And her mother noticed Elena could see, she noticed, and her mother said nothing about it, which meant it had registered as simply the natural behavior of a man who paid attention. After dinner, after her mother had gone and the kitchen was quiet again, Elena and James stood at the counter doing dishes the ordinary way, side by side, and she thought about the woman who had stood in a hotel corridor 3 months ago, calculating whether she was staying or leaving. And she thought about the version of this arrangement she had agreed to, 12 months controlled and contractual and designed to be survived rather than lived. And she thought about all the things she had not written into any clause. James, she said. Elena, I've never told you. She stopped, started again. She was not going to be sentimental. She was going to be honest, which was the only language that had ever worked between them. I spent 26 years being the person who held everything together for everyone else. I got good at it. I got good at not needing things, because needing things meant depending on people who might not be able to hold the weight. She set down the dish she was drying and turned to face him. I want you to know that I know the difference between what I came into this doing and what I'm doing now. And I am not confused about which one this is. James looked at her. He set down his own dish. He turned toward her fully the way he did when something was worth his complete attention, which had become, she now understood, his most specific expression of respect. What is this? He said. This is me choosing, she said, without a contract, without a clock, without someone's debt as the reason. She met his eyes. I'm choosing you, plainly, because you are honest and you are steady and you pay attention, and you stood in a parking lot in the cold because I needed someone to stand there, and you didn't make it into anything bigger than what it was, which is exactly the kind of man I have never in my life known how to ask for. She exhaled. That is what this is. James reached out and took her hand, and his grip was certain and unhurried and exactly the right pressure, which was how he did everything, and he said, then I choose you back, without a clause, without a timeline, without anything except the fact that you are the first person in years I have not had to translate myself for, and I did not know how much that cost me until it stopped costing me. She stepped forward. He met her halfway. They stood in the kitchen in the ordinary light, and there was no audience, no investors, no board members, no Victor Crane at the edge of the room looking for a weakness. There was only this, the two of them, real and chosen and unhurried. 3 weeks later, the Meridian project received final approval. James called Elena from the site, and she could hear in his voice the particular exhale of a man who had held his breath for a long time and could finally let it go. She was on a break between patients, and she sat on a bench outside the hospital and listened to him talk about the project, not the numbers, not the investor implications, but the building itself, what it was going to look like, and against the skyline, who was going to use it, what he had originally imagined when he was standing on an empty lot in Manhattan a decade ago, deciding what to build. She had not known he thought about buildings that way. She had assumed he thought about them the way he thought about everything, strategically, efficiently, to a purpose. She had not known there was a version of James Whitaker who stood on empty lots and imagined what could exist where nothing did. Tell me more about it, she said. He told her. She listened. And somewhere in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon on a bench outside Mercy General Hospital, in a pair of scrubs with a coffee she hadn't finished, Elena Hart understood with complete certainty that she was not in a transaction anymore. She was not managing an outcome or stabilizing a situation or cleaning up a consequence. She was sitting in the middle of her own actual life, listening to the person she loved talk about something that mattered to him, and it mattered to her because it mattered to him. And that was it. That was the whole of it. That was the thing no contract could have written and no exit clause could have protected her from. She was not afraid of it. She had expected to be afraid of it. She had built so many walls against exactly this, against needing, against depending, against the specific vulnerability of being someone who could be reached. The walls were gone now. She was not sure exactly when they had come down. She thought maybe they had come down slowly, one Thursday dinner at a time, one honest answer at a time, one moment of a man standing in a parking lot in the cold for no other reason than that she was there and he was not willing to let her stand in it alone. 2 months after that, her mother told her father what she knew. Not all of it, the shape of it, and her father called Elena and cried, which he did genuinely, and Elena sat on the phone with him and felt the familiar exhaustion and the familiar love and said, "Dad, I need you to get help, real help, not for me, for yourself." And for the first time in 26 years of apologies, her father said yes with the specific weight of a man who meant it. And Elena made him say it to James's face over dinner the following week. And James shook his hand and said simply, "We're glad you're here." And Elena watched her father hear those words and sit up slightly, straighter, and something in that straightening broke her heart and healed it simultaneously. Life did not become simple. Elena had not expected it to become simple. She still worked double shifts. Her father still had hard days. The world still had opinions about a billionaire and a nurse and what they could possibly have in common. Carol still reviewed everything because Elena was not naive, only changed. But she and James had dinner on Thursdays, and sometimes on Tuesdays, and sometimes on days that were neither because one of them had had a difficult day and the other showed up anyway. He still refilled her water glass without being asked. She still challenged him in rooms full of people who expected her to be decorative. He still made her feel like being exactly who she was, blunt and stubborn and relentlessly honest, was not a complication to be managed, but the specific thing that made her worth every conversation. She kept the planner. She had not bought a new one. She filled it page by page with the ordinary architecture of a life that was finally unmistakably hers, not managed for anyone, not contracted for anyone, not arranged around the wreckage that other people left behind. Hers. One evening, sitting at the kitchen table in the apartment that she had begun to think of as theirs because James had asked and she had said yes, Elena held the planner open and looked at the weeks ahead, shifts and dinners, and her mother's birthday, and a follow-up with Carol, and a date she had circled in quiet private certainty, and she thought about the woman in the borrowed dress who had stood in a hotel elevator with her palm flat against the door waiting for her hand to stop shaking. She looked at her own hand now, steady, not because she was performing stability, steady because she had finally stopped carrying everything alone and her hands had finally, after 26 years, gotten to rest. Elena Hart had walked into a gala looking for the earliest polite exit and had instead walked into the truest thing in her life. She had signed a contract she was told would expire in 12 months and had built something instead that did not have an end date because the best things never do. She had been handed a problem and had turned it into a choice, and she had made that choice clearly, with open eyes and a steady hand on her own terms, for her own reasons, in the only language she had ever trusted, the truth. And the truth was this: she loved James Whitaker not because a document required it, not because a debt demanded it, not because a man named Victor Crane had maneuvered two people into the same room and expected them to be diminished by it. She loved him because he was real and she was real, and they had told each other the truth from the very beginning, even when the truth was difficult, and they had built on that truth one honest moment at a time until it became the kind of foundation that doesn't require inspection because you already know it will hold. She closed the planner. She heard James in the other room. She heard the particular sound of his presence movement, quiet, the specific rhythm of someone who was home, and she sat in the warmth of it without questioning it or measuring it or building a wall against it. Elena Hart had spent her whole life cleaning up what other people left behind. She was finished with that now. What she had now was not someone else's wreckage reshaped into something livable. What she had was something she had chosen and built and walked toward with her eyes open and her hands steady and her whole self present. And that at last was more than enough. It was everything.